Hey, Mr. Binks, you know how we've been talking a lot about the Biome Broth study in this home. Yes, and you've been upping your quota of bone broth every day. Yes, well, we're about to jump on Zoom now and speak to Dr. Carol Hughes, the microbiologist that's studying dogs' microbiomes from our broth biome study, and to Rachel Down from Boil and Broth, who has been supplying the broth for our groundbreaking research project, which is all about this question: could adding bone broth to your dog's daily diet enhance their microbiome? I'm Anna Webb. Welcome to A Dog's Life. Rachel Down and Carol Hughes, welcome back to A Dog's Life.
Hi, Anna. Thanks for having us back on.
Yeah, hi, Anna. Morning. It's really good to be back, or afternoon, actually. Yeah, absolutely.
It is just afternoon. Listen, you've both been on the podcast before. Dr. Carol, you've been talking in depth into the microbiome earlier this year, which I know both episodes were really well received. And of course, Rachel, amazing. You are Rachel Bone Broth.
Otherwise known as Bone Broth.
Yeah, it's a real expert of bone broth. And what we've done, haven't we? We've kind of teamed together to put together the first ever research project to really put bone broth to the test. Now, Rachel, would you like to explain a bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, it's just amazing to be back on. And obviously the Biome Broth study has been such an exciting project for us to be working on. And we've been working on it for the last few months. But so my own personal journey with bone broth has obviously led me to run Boil and Broth for the last 7 years. And I started making broth after I had a lot of health problems back in 2017. I'd been on the NHS roundabout, as I call it, for 3 years, not able to get anywhere with my health problems. I've been sick for 3 years since having my children. And I just was finding that the conventional medicine route was not suitable for me because I didn't want to get caught up in the drug cycle. So I decided to research, and I discovered all about gut health and how, the gut microbiome can have such an impact on your overall health. And just learning about this led me to discover new foods, which was broth particularly, and kefir water as well. So I started making these products in my home, having them every day, and switching to an all-natural diet with no, limited sugar. And within 12 weeks, I'd actually lost 2.5 stone and completely reversed my health condition. And then over 2 years, I subsequently went on to lose 6 stone in weight. So really, for me, it was very much a question of why, how, what on earth happened? Like, how did my body do this? What was it that changed? And and I truly believe that broth was such a powerful part of that process. And then obviously making the broth now for quite some years and helping other people, but particularly dogs. We've seen some remarkable changes in dog health, particularly where, they have dogs particularly have been enjoying their food again, hydrated well, switching to all natural foods like we've obviously spoken about before, Anna and Carol, to do, more natural raw foods for dogs. And there's been some remarkable results. So I heard a podcast with you and Carol going back a few months, and Carol was just talking about broth, and it was explaining about how she'd seen a microbial change when giving broth to dogs, and it really did interest me. So I just had to reach out to you ladies and see if you wanted to be part of this Biome Broth study, because nobody has delved really into into how broth is able to support gut health, particularly for canines. It is the world first for canines.
Well, Rachel, it's absolutely brilliant. I mean, likewise, I've been a mad fan of bone broth for many, many years, and been through the process of making my flat smell of bone broth for days. As I do believe, that Hippocrates was right. It is, you are what you eat, and let medicine be your food. But bringing Carol in, because it is important here that we are obviously focusing on dogs, but that's not to say that cats and people, obviously, as Rachel said, can benefit from bone broth. But in your research, Carol, as a microbiologist, working as you do with Aberystwyth University, you've studied thousands of animals' microbiomes, haven't you?
Yes, yeah, we have. We've been working on this since 2014, and we've seen some huge changes because the microbiome is an ecosystem. When you put an ecosystem under pressure, a little bit like, say, the Great Barrier Reef, when you put it under pressure, it changes. And the pressures are things like chemicals, poor diet, processed food, injections, vaccines, wormers, all sorts of things put pressure on the microbiome. If it's healthy and resilient, it'll bounce back. But we've slowly seen a decline in the canine microbiome that was compounded during the COVID years. I'm not sure why, but possibly to do with the amount of chemicals that were coming in, like antibiotics. We've seen a decline, and part of that decline has been the good gut bacteria, such as the bifidobacteria. So for me, in the past few years, bone broth has been really important because we know it feeds the good gut bacteria. And you can have a dog that has 650 different species in the microbiome, and perhaps only 3 of those species will be doing a job. And the job that they're doing is probably the wrong job. And the rest, the hundreds that are left, the hundreds of bacteria that are still in the microbiome, are there at really low levels because we're not supporting them through nutrition. We're not supporting the ecosystem and preventing it declining. And bone broth has been a real tool to be able to restore some of those important bacteria that are there at low levels.
Gosh, I mean, Rachel, you must be like going, yeah, like this on the other end of Zoom at the moment. So many questions, Carol. I love, first of all, that you described the microbiome as a barrier reef, because we all know the Attenborough programs that reveal what the barrier reef is looking like now compared to what it should do, and it's so sad, it makes me cry. But the thought that could be happening inside our dogs, that is really terrifying. But what are the findings initially? Because Rachel, bringing you in here, we decided, didn't we, to put bone broth to the test, but just in a very limited time frame. And the rules of the dogs that have entered the study, which were just under 30 dogs, I think, Rachel, is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we had 29 dogs come forward, and we sort of requested that no dogs had should not have broth before. So that all these dogs never had broth before. They had broth for 4 weeks, but we tested the gut microbiome before the broth, which was done through taking fecal samples and them being sent off to Carol and the lab. And then they, the participants gave the dogs broth for 4 weeks, and then did another fecal sample test at the end of the four weeks, and that obviously has been sent off to the lab. So yeah, and the only other thing that we asked, really for the participants to ensure that dogs weren't taking supplements, or if they were, that they were to declare them so that we could collect more of a database. So everybody filled out a health questionnaire at the beginning, detailing, some of the issues that they'd seen with their dog up until the point, and also what they've fed their dogs, which again, Anna, I know you're very passionate about, what we feed our dogs. And obviously if they're taking any supplements at all or medication. So we've got all that data. So we're putting it into, I suppose, a database now. And then, we'll be able to really compare the data from the results that are coming back to Carol. And some of those, some of those variables that we have discovered with the participants too.
It's amazing. So, Carol, initially, I know there's still a few results to come back in, but initially, could you say that you were pleasantly surprised, amazed, bowled over, even slightly shocked to see, in such a kind of controlled group. So they'd never had the broth before, which I think is the important factor. What were the most interesting, or are the most interesting bacterial, microbial changes that you've seen?
Well, I guess the most striking is the increase in diversity, which has been going down in dogs since the COVID kind of era. Diversity is important, and it's measured with a scientific formula. It's measured by the Shannon index. And not only does it take into context the number of species, but also how they're represented in the microbiome. So if you just counted species and came up with 750, but 600 were represented at 0.001%, you wouldn't be able to measure that. So the Shannon index actually measures how those bacteria are represented, and from that you can work out whether the microbiome is actually doing its job. So the biodiversity scores have all gone up, and that's the most striking thing, I guess, and that's one of the most important things, because we're seeing I'm just looking at my list now, we've got biodiversity scores as low as 1.5. Well, pre-COVID they were 3 and above, so they've already gone down. So the 1.5 has now gone up to 2.5 in a month. So you can't actually argue with that aspect. And I think with the bone broth, what it does is changes the environment of the microbiome to become more favourable towards the good gut bacteria. And it also provides food for the good gut bacteria. And then the good gut bacteria help to reduce the bad bacteria. And we've looked at Helicobacter and a species of Clostridia that are involved in breaking down the gut wall barrier, because leaky gut is something that we kind of see a lot in dogs. So we chose 2 sort of fairly important biomarkers to kick us off with. But as I've glanced through some of the results this morning, and that there's a lot of data, I can see that there are other important improvements. So, we've got plenty.
Go on, give us a little taster of some of the other bits and pieces that you've just noticed.
My huge interest is antibiotic resistant bacteria, and because the diversity has dropped, you tend to get these species of bacteria that are called biofilms, and they gather together and they hang out in the biome and they rob the dog of nutrients. And I'm always on the lookout for things that will work against those biofilms. And as we've gone forward, and we are at some kind of tipping point for the dog, we need to break down those biofilms with some urgency, because it is linked to things like food sensitivity and allergies, because the dog's immune system isn't working right while you've got biofilm taking up maybe 50% of the biome. So a quick glance through this morning, it's looking like we're targeting the biofilm bacteria, which is fantastic news, but we've got to dig deeper into that.
Wow,
So
that's
Carol,
amazing.
it's interesting, because the question is, you mentioned there food sensitivities and allergies. Obviously a lot of dogs suffer from these, and it can be never cured even, and it's very persistent, and it causes a lot of stress, not only for the dog but the owner. There's nothing worse than your dog constantly licking their feet. You can't stop them, or then they're biting and scratching. It gets very frustrating for everyone. And of course, owners will then default and think, right, I'm just going to have to give them a steroid, because. And then, of course, the irony, isn't it, with that, Carol, would you agree that, the steroid, what would the steroid then at that point potentially also do to the microbiome, Carol?
Well, it wipes out the good gut bacteria. And for a dog that doesn't have many to start with, it's kind of disastrous. It doesn't work. When you think of that microbiome as the ecosystem, the Great Barrier Reef, the more you kind of stimulate it in the wrong way, it needs balance. It needs the pressure taking off it so it can recover in a healthy way. So any medication that you're putting into the gut will change that balance within the microbiome that's already kind of teetering on the edge. So it doesn't actually do anything. And I think as soon as you come off the steroids, it's reversed. And you mentioned persistence. Well, that describes biofilm bacteria to a T. They are persistent. And I think they are going to be the thing of the future that impacts the dog health the most. And it's something that we urgently need to get a handle on, now, as soon as we can.
So, Carol, Rachel, I know you're listening. I'm going to bring you in a minute, but this biofilm really interests me because could there be different types of biofilm? A biofilm that is connected perhaps to a spayed bitch, a biofilm that could be connected to a neutered dog. Could it be age related, or could we eventually discover that it's related to turkey meat or chicken or beef or potentially an environmental stressor on the outside?
Yeah, I think it's possibly all of those things. I think you are seeing some common themes coming through with the biofilm. I mean, for instance, you're seeing dogs that are fed raw, which is fantastic usually, that they're developing biofilms because biofilms are by nature aggressive and they rely on the good gut bacteria like bifidobacteria to produce chemicals to reduce the biofilm, to stop the takeover bid. So without the brakes on, without those kind of balancing and checks that exist in a healthy microbiome, you are open to an aggressive takeover. I do think that factory farmed meat will bring some bacteria in. We've already seen that with factory farmed fish. It brings in a bacteria called Shionella. And when the factory farm fish are taken over by Shionella because it's antibiotic resistant, then that shows in the microbiome tests for dogs that are fed salmon, because it does come through. So there are all these things to take into consideration. And I think that we are at a tipping point. We have to really start being serious about the health of our dog through the microbiome. And I think by providing food like bone broth, you are at least supporting the bifidobacteria, supporting the good gut bacteria, so they're no longer kind of hanging on by the skin of their teeth, and they can actually do the job they're supposed to do.
So interesting. Rachel, I mean, this must be music to your ears, really, that we're seeing that bone broth is promoting the good bacteria and therefore reducing the bad bacteria. It's like it's creating homeostasis, total balance, but just naturally all by itself.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is just remarkable. I mean, I've known in my heart for quite some time that there's something quite amazing, quite miraculous about broth. I mean, it's been around for such a long time, thousands of years. The first recording of it is actually written in the Bible, back at about 2,000 years ago. So it's really, really, really an amazing food, that we've developed over the years. And unfortunately, a lot of these old traditional methods of cooking and fermenting have been lost because we no longer need to store our food in a particular way. Obviously we've got refrigeration now, we've got freezers, so our food is our food preservation has been lost. And something like broth has been used around for such a long time because people have been using the whole animal. They've been cooking, they eat everything, then they feed it to their dog, clearly. So this has been an amazing evolution of food for such a long time, and it's clearly what our bodies need, and it's just amazing to get the science to back it up.
I know, Carol, you are kind of the main integral piece here, really, being, a microbiologist. But you've also compared dogs' microbiomes to cats, for example. And what you discovered was that cats are loads healthier. Why is that, do you think?
Well, cats are they're very soil based. That was quite a surprise. We obviously test everything. We test anything environmental. We do water, we do food, we do everything because we're so interested in the passage of microbes through the environment, through the body of the animal and out the other side. So with cats, they are closer to soil. Now, having said that, and for that, they're far more complex. And I think they have higher levels. Well, I know they have higher levels of bifidobacteria and dogs have much lower levels. Having said that, I have seen a decline in cats in the last, I suppose, 3 batches we've had in. Now, I can't conclude anything from that. It could be the cats we've got are different in some way, or perhaps are ill in some way. We need to dig into it. But it may be because they're indoor cats, or they're more likely to spend more time indoors. And cats are very soil based. And I was chatting to someone the other day, and they were talking about wild cats, and had you watched wild cats, when they catch something, they'll rub their meat in soil before they eat it. That makes perfect sense to me, but I don't know if it's true. I only heard it yesterday.
That's amazing. But you see, I've always wondered, I mean, I don't know. Look, there's so many pros and cons about indoor cats and outdoor cats. It's difficult because there's so many awful environmental stressors out in the big wide world. I mean, well, at least there is in London, that you don't really want your cat to go out. But then is it actually cruel to keep a cat indoors, you see? I mean, you do wonder, as they get so much enrichment just by sitting on the top of the fence and looking at everything, the sights, sounds and the smells, you know, and it's really important for them mentally, I think, emotionally and physically for cats. Whereas dogs, we haven't got a chance to do that, because you can't let your dog out the front door and say, we'll come back in a couple of hours. You know, you'll come back run over, maybe not come back at all because you've been nicked. Anything can happen, you know. So, but I think through all of this study, what would be great to reveal are, you know, some of the stressors, even stress from humans transmitted to our pets, that could influence the microbiome. I mean, do you think stress, Carol, plays a part in it all?
Yeah, but I think it's all part of that tipping point, isn't it, with the microbiome? You're going along, it's going along in a balanced way, and it takes a hit from something. So it takes a hit from the animal being stressed. So that changes the microbes, as the microbes reorganize themselves to support the health of the host, because that's their job. Their job is to keep the host happy and healthy. So they take a hit from that, and then they may get a dose of antibiotics. As you say, they may stay indoors. I mean, all of these things happen, but the more the stresses pile on, the worse the microbiome becomes, and the more unstable. Again, like the barrier reef, you can't keep putting stresses on and expect the microbes to bounce back, because they'll be subject to an aggressive takeover by a bacteria that means the host harm, not benefit. And then, you know, you've kind of lost the fight, really. So the fact that you've got something like bone broth that will support health so strongly, especially when so many stresses are coming in inevitably with the lifestyle that our animals have, and we have too, to an extent, that's kind of a fight back for the microbiome. It's giving it fuel to keep the host happy and healthy. And I think it is a real crisis for me, looking at the results that I see on a daily basis. I think we truly are in a crisis with the dog microbiome, and the cat looking like.
That's very worrying. I mean, you know, I know that about 70% of all cats, it might be more actually, do die of renal failure due to the fact many of them will eat dry food as they like to graze through the day. And, you know, allegedly it's easier to feed them on dry food. I'd actually totally disagree. It's totally very easy to feed them on non-dry food and non-tinned food. What I'm saying here is, it's just extraordinary. Could bone broth be a probiotic, Carol?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I know it contains bifidobacteria. I did find some papers. It does actually contain bifidobacteria, but plus it provides nutrients to assist bifidobacteria to increase. And that's really important. So it creates a good environment in the gut. It's full of amino acids. I think it's 25% amino acids. So by providing the bacteria with amino acids, you are feeding the good gut bacteria. That is it. The biofilm bacteria don't eat amino acids. So you're immediately creating a favorable environment that will change the health of the host just by doing that.
Oh, Rachel, this is so amazing, isn't it? You know, because we've been discussing, I mean, there's figures out. Last year, there was a big survey done that proved that 1 in 3 dogs does get some type of cancer before the age of 10, you know, which is really young. And we all know dogs get stiff. They all suffer from arthritic symptoms at some point. But Rachel, you know, you'll be on the side to say that bone broth can really alleviate arthritic symptoms as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, as Carol was just mentioning there, you know, broth contains so many different nutrients. It's not just about the collagen. Everybody just seems to think, oh, broth contains collagen, and if it if it doesn't wobble, then there's no collagen in it. Well, actually, broth's got all collagen in it. It just depends how much is in there. But collagen is just one protein. Is you know made up of the 3 amino acids, and actually, yeah, there's so much other nutrients in broth, you know, glucosamine and chondroitin. They are 2 amino sugars that are found in broth naturally. Again, it's really important to mention these are all natural nutrients. You know, I think we spend so much time searching for supplements for our dogs and for ourselves, for our cats, you know, and actually broth contains 12 different types of natural supplements. And glucosamine and chondroitin are 2 of those. And it's really important for your joints and your ligaments. And, you know, but dogs definitely should be having broth every day from a young age, because they're growing. You know, broth supports muscle growth, broth supports the joint and ligament care, you know, and obviously gut health as well, which is, we know that 80% of the immune system lies in the gut. So, you know, having a good healthy gut, you're going to have a longer life with your dog and fewer visits to the vets, which I think is really, really powerful. You know, a broth a day keeps the vet away.
Yeah, gosh, a cup of broth. I love it. Keeps the vet away. Really brilliant. Carol, you know, I was listening to a Radio 4 documentary. It was in May, it was in May. So it was after we recorded our initial episodes. And it was all about when, I'm sure it can be found on BBC Sounds. I might put the link in, actually, because it was all about when bacteria was actually discovered in our gut, you know, because that was really revolutionary. I think Rachel listened to the episode. I did send you the link, I think. Anyway, what was really interesting about this episode was that they have discovered bacteria is actually in our brain, and nobody ever knew that until really quite recently. So this whole thing about the gut brain axis, that people think, yeah, okay, you know, I sort of get it, you are what you eat, but it's more than that. These little bacteria, because they're species, they can really communicate with each other, because there are actually bacteria in our brain. Carol, can you explain that a bit more?
Well, I'm not sure I can explain that from a dog perspective, because I don't think the research has been done. But yes, I can understand the concept for sure. I think I spend most of my time trying to track pathogens through the microbiome and over the gut wall, or deciding what is a pathogen, because that's kind of changing with the loss of the true pathogen, like Campylobacter and Helicobacter. We've lost a lot of those species, but we've got others taking over, like Treponema, which comes from the syphilis family, and they translocate over the gut wall and cause problems in far-flung organs around the body. And you can actually track those. I've never got as far as tracking what's in the canine brain, but I mean, surely that's something to move on to. But bacteria do speak to each other, either by producing chemicals or transferring genes even, and it happens very rapidly. So it's kind of a no-brainer to me to really pay attention to the balance of the microbiome before anything else, because it's what keeps you alive. And we've had some dogs, unfortunately, with cancer. It's funny you mentioned cancer, that we had the analysis come in, but the dog sadly died before, I mean, within a few days of the test coming in, but both owners wanted that analysis to go through so we could check it out. And the microbiome was mounting such a health package rescue. It was producing antibacterials, producing steroids. I mean, a whole raft of unusual steroids to keep the host alive. But sadly, if you've lost the diversity, you know, going back to the original right at the beginning of the conversation, if you've only got 3 species doing a job and the rest, hundreds of species just hanging on, it's not going to mount much of a response, a rescue package response if the dog becomes ill. And that, I think, is something that is critical and needs addressing as rapidly as we can.
So, you know, it'd be great, you know, vets could prescribe broth and recommend more of a, you know, you are what you eat approach, which I fear, to be honest with you, absolutely doesn't happen. And I don't think it'll be happening anytime in the near future. But that's why, of course, people are looking at different supplements. I think supplements are more popular now and they're more available for dogs, definitely, than they were 20 years ago. I mean, without doubt, probably also on the human level, actually, they're more available. And I know people get very confused as to which supplement's any good and should I buy the expensive one or is the cheaper one still going to work and all the rest of it. And it's also a market that's been hijacked, I think, with fillers and additives to kind of bulk things out, and of course flashy marketing, you know, and perhaps bone broth, because it is pretty simple, isn't it? You know, it's kind of wholesome. It is what it says on the tin, but even Rachel, you know, you've mentioned to me that not all bone broth sometimes is the bone broth it says on the packet.
No, scarily, that is the truth. Unfortunately, you know, just what you're talking about then about the supplements industry and and clearly, you know, in the pet health space and the human health space, you know, there are just people out there to make money and they just look at it as a money-making opportunity rather than actually helping people. And unfortunately, there are some bone broth brands that are claiming to be bone broth, but they're not bone broth at all. There's one in particular, I, for legal reasons, I can't name names, but they are claiming it's a dehydrated broth, but it's actually a hydrolyzed protein, which is completely different. So bone broth is made using a natural process of obviously boiling bones with apple cider vinegar and water. But something like a hydrolyzed protein is when it goes through a process of chemical extraction of nutrients and from the bones itself. So yeah, and it's, you know, clearly it does have some health benefits, but it's important to remember it's not natural. And I think, you know, Anna, the most important thing that I can say is that, you know, people need to consider what they're giving their dog, you know, and what they're taking their dog to the vets for. It's very similar to the humans, you know. I heard yesterday that dogs require vaccinations every year. I mean, that's
actually, Rachel, I mean, I've got to step in there. I mean, they absolutely don't. And science has concurred that they absolutely don't. And they're
offering them, though, aren't they? Like the vets say that you've got to come back for your annual vaccination. Is that correct?
Absolutely, they are. And that's where it's all a bit going wrong. And it's where I really hope that the CMA investigation that is full steam ahead at the moment is going to highlight, you know, because, you know, we don't do that in a human sphere. You know, you don't have, if you were to have your MMR jab as a child, for example, you certainly wouldn't be having an annual booster for it for the rest of your life. But that is exactly what the vet profession recommends.
I understand this, Anna, and it's a real problem. And it's not just vaccines, is it? It's flea treatment. It's everything else that they're suggesting that, you know, you need to keep up on top. But the problem is what are you putting into your dog, you know, and then over time, you know, with a poor diet, with lack of exercise, lack of going outside, you know, it's only, you know, common sense that things are not going to, you know, function as well. So really taking that natural approach, you know, looking at what you're giving your dog, feeding your dog. Is it natural? Is it processed? You know, having broth, kefir water as well. We haven't, you know, that'd be amazing to do some studies around kefir water as well, because Carol was talking about bifidobacterium, and we've had all our kefir water lab tested, and we know that bifidobacterium is present in our kefir water.
Wow, I know I must get onto your kefir water actually, Rachel, because I know I've actually recommended it to a very good friend of mine and she's loving it, absolutely loving it. In fact, that's Joe Good, because Joe asked me, Anna, what's good? What's a good probiotic for the human, Anna? And I go, kefir water. And Joe's like, what? No, it's yogurt. No, I'm going, no, actually, here's a link. Go figure it out. So, yeah, great feedback on that front, actually, because, it does, this study, if anything, is making me a bit more conscious about my own health. I just look after my dogs, and so long as they're all okay, then that's great. But for me, the mantra is, you keep the body burden down. So you have a certain, that's what Carol's been implying through this, is that the microbiome can take a bit, it can fight back, but if you keep pushing it, keep blowing those big explosives over there and all the rest of it, analogy to the world going on, it's going to die. And it's that tipping point where the burden just becomes too heavy and the dog then falls into a state of disease or inflammation. Would you agree on that bit, Carol?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's you've summed it up perfectly well, and I think that's when we have a lot of dogs with nothing in the microbiome that are then put onto a hypoallergenic diet, simply because they haven't got any bacteria to digest any food. But the problem is they then can't move back onto a diet that will bring those gut bacteria back, the good gut bacteria, because they can't digest anything. So it's kind of like a vicious circle, really, and a downward spiral. I think we need to get a grip on how diverse the microbiome is, but we need every single different species to be doing its job. And you can't do that if you just kind of say, well, we'll give up and give it a hyperallergenic diet, instead of sorting out the problem based on how the decline that's coming in from the burden, as you so beautifully put. That's absolutely right.
And this is it though as well, allopathic medicine has its place, but it is always treating the symptom, not the cause. So, that's what I always ask, but what's causing this? Baggy had a suspected, blocked bladder last week, but he didn't in the end, but or bags. It was just another typical example. Well, we'll put him on painkillers. I go, painkillers. Why? What? Why would they help? What's the cause? Surely we've got to fix the cause. But as he didn't have a blocked bladder, it didn't really materialize into anything. But that, I think, is the key difference between allopathic. It's symptom based, whereas naturopathic is causally based. Rachel, would you concur on that?
Yeah, definitely. My own personal health journey was very much about what's wrong with me, what's the cause of this, and obviously in the exact example that you've been saying about the pet space, it's the same in the human health space. They just, you go to the doctor, they're writing a prescription for your symptom, you take the drugs, you go back again because you've got a new symptom, therefore you get a new script, so it's the same old issues, but nobody is considering, or no, that's sorry. Let me retract. Very few people, particularly doctors, consider, and vets consider, what's going on in the gut. But we know that through the research, and particularly the research that Carol has been doing over the years, that it does go back to the gut. And really, look, obviously the gut is not, the solution for everything, but it's a really good start. Don't you agree?
Oh gosh, I think this research project is just amazing. It's so exciting. I find it really inspiring because it gives us hope, not only on a human level, but of course, for me, most importantly, with my own pets. It gives me peace of mind, which, gosh, it's worth millions of pounds. And Carol, a lot of this is thanks to the work you've been doing.
Yeah, well, and hopefully we've got much more to come, because we'll move on then to metagenomics and look at viruses, fungi. We'll look at the whole different levels or layers of microbes in the microbiome. So hopefully we'll just learn more. But I think it is about the environment and considering what's coming into the dog is the biggest deal, and everyone can do that. It isn't, you don't need a vet to do that, or a nutritionist per se, but you just have to kind of consider the pressure that you're putting the microbiome under, and it is actually the thing that keeps your dog alive and healthy, and learning to look after it is just the best thing that you could ever do for a dog.
It's great. So, I mean, all I'm going to urge every listener right now to do is to follow the link, which is in the show notes, to go to the crowdfunding page and learn a little bit more about exactly what we're doing. And as you've just heard, how we want to do more. And of course, raise awareness so that, if every dog had a cup of bone broth a day, imagine if you could keep your vet away.
And I agree. Now, listen, if you don't mind, Anna, I just wanted to explain a little bit more about the crowdfunder, because it is.
Yes, go for it, Rachel. Go on.
Please, if you don't mind, because we're running a prize draw. It's some amazing prize draws for dog lovers out there.
Don't we forget about these prizes, and they are simply amazing. I'm just excited about the bone broth, but the prizes, honestly, are really good. Go, Rachel.
They are amazing. Like, somebody can have a break in London with themselves and their partner and their dog. They get to stay in a 5-star restaurant, to dine at an award-winning steakhouse restaurant, and have a London discovery. So that in itself is just an amazing prize. But then we've got 2 other amazing prize bundles. We've got another one, which is 3 months half price Paleo Ridge, which for me is just amazing, because they are
an excellent raw food.
Great brand, and for anybody who's, even if they're not feeding raw yet, it's a great introduction to get their dog introduced into raw. And then as part of that package as well, there's just this amazing stay anywhere in Europe, up to £500, which is just another remarkable package. And then the final package, which is just mind blowing, it's like a whole bundle, wellness bundle. We've got gifts from Ingenious Probiotics. We've got gifts from Biome for pets, with the Biome tests. Anna, you've very kindly given up some consultancy time as well. So somebody who's really got having a difficult time with a dog, they can speak to you. And yes, they get 12 months bone broth. And finally, this is just such an amazing part of this prize. It is the dogs and horses proper leather collar and lead. Now, it's a really amazing gift, that one. So yeah, and listen, apart from the prizes, even if you don't want any of those prizes, it's just a really great cause to get involved with the Biome Broth study, and the money's going to be spent giving some to All Dogs Matter. And then we are going to be reinvesting the money back into the Biome Broth study, because, Anna and Carol, we'd love to do more studies around cats. We'd love to do studies around, the kefir water. And also, I have particular interest as to diving in a bit deeper to understand what is it within the broth that's really, is there something is it all of the nutrients? Is it one particular nutrient? Is it a group of nutrients that are really helping to make the change within the gut microbiome?
You see, this is so interesting, and yeah, I mean, that's it. So everybody, please check it out. And if you can contribute just a £5, it really will make a big difference. And it could go towards your dog's own longevity. Isn't that right, Carol?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we are in a critical place with the microbiome of our pets, and possibly with ourselves too. And I think it's just fascinating how you can use food to support health in such a powerful and positive way. And the more we find out about it, the better. And what I love about this, it's kind of independent research as well. We can involve people and make it independent to support the health of the dog going forward. Well, hopefully for the next 10 years or so.
Well, yes, let's really hope so. Well, thank you again, Carol. Thank you again, Rachel, for, doing this podcast today. And obviously, I'll just back up with my canine nutrition hat on. Bone broth was the one thing in my study over 12 years ago now that my tutors recommended as being the most powerful immune system boost. And that's the point in time when I began making it myself. So everyone think it over, and please click through on the link that's in the show notes. Thanks again, and we're going to be back in touch very soon.
Thank you. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
That's our show, Mr. Binks. What did you think? Yes, I'm going to get your bone broth in a minute. And you're right, it is time for Woof of the Week. The Biome Broth study is a research project that really has already proved that adding bone broth to your dog's diet can really enhance their microbiome. So why don't you get involved with our crowdfunder? It's simple, it's a prize draw, and you have the opportunity of winning 3 equally amazing prizes, from a night's stay in a 5-star Uber dog-friendly London hotel with dinner in an amazing restaurant and a whole lot more. So click on the link and get involved. Well, I hope you all enjoyed it and learned a little bit more about the magic of bone broth. Thanks again, of course, to Dr. Carol Hughes and to Rachel Down for joining me today, and all the links to them are in the show notes. Thanks, of course, to Mike Hansen, my producer, for all the music and production as ever. What's that, Mr. Binks? You're right. Yes, we will be back in your feed next Sunday. So why don't you subscribe? Because it's free. And that way you'll never miss another show. Bye for now.